Yeah, I'd like to. You take. No, it's hard. I'll move them. Move it back or move it this way or something.
If everybody could please have a seat, we're going to get started.
Is that okay?
My name is Luke Nelson. I'm the chapter chair. I wanted to thank everybody for coming. It's a great turnout. I can tell a lot of people wanted to get outside and meet other people and come out to a great event, so we appreciate you coming out. I just have one or two announcements I'd like to make before we get to Scott. From our maintenance chair who does a lot of work on the Finger Lakes Trail, the next FLT trail maintenance is October 2nd. And she'll be sending out an email, that's Beth Wheeler, on September 20th to those of...
I don't know that everybody can hear you.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Sorry. You're watching
Jill?
back and forth.
You're great, Jill. I love you.
She'll be sending out an email looking for interest if you haven't already expressed interest. If you are interested, Beth Wheeler's email is on the website under the contact information. So it's October 2nd for the FLT trail maintenance. Please let her know if you're interested in that, okay? And if you have any other questions on it, feel free to contact me after the presentation tonight. I did want to call out one thing. I wanted to congratulate Cindy Hopper on achieving her 46. So our presenter is Scott van Laer. If you read the ranger reports or any information in Adirondacks over the last 20, 25 years, you've heard Scott. He was a ranger for 25 years. He's now the director for the Paul Smith's Visitor Information Center. And Scott, he's going to speak to us about growing up in the Adirondacks. His father was a forest ranger and his inspiration, and how that inspired him. And he's got a lot of wilderness stories and things that he'd like to share. Feel free to ask questions along the way. He's more than fine with that. He recently retired in April, and he's transitioned to his current position with the DEC. And that is at Paul Smith's, if anybody wants to visit that. He brings his commitment to educating the public full circle with his job at Paul Smith's, because Paul Smith's is his alma mater. His new role includes teaching recreational programs and outdoor skills like land navigation, with the goal of reducing the number of hikers needing rescues. I'd like to introduce Scott van Laer.
Thank you very much. I'm a little hard of hearing, so please tell me if I'm shouting into the microphone and it's unbearable. So when I've spoken to ADK chapters before, I've had a few times where there's been people in the audience that I've rescued or helped rescue. I'm serious. Nobody raised a hand tonight, so that's good. So yeah, this talk, I'm very informal. When I've done these, people really just kind of, you know, I'm just not that canned with the presentation. A lot of people just want to hear me talk about what it was like to be a ranger, and the ranger rescue stories, the ones you read about, you know, that concise version, there's always a lot more to it. And I gotta tell you the truth, they never get it exactly right. Even when we write it, they'll change it on us and get it wrong. So this is also the first time I've given a talk since I retired, so it feels a little weird not being in uniform. That has been an adjustment for me. I'm pretty good with retirement, but it has felt, every now and then I talk to the rangers, or I see a big rescue around. I start to get the feeling of missing it a little bit. But you know, the state was willing to pay me not to work, so I went that route. So I don't have a clicker, so I occasionally have to walk over here to move this, but I don't really have that many slides. So this is my father. This is him probably in the early 80s. Does anybody still have that pack? Like nobody has an external frame pack anymore. So he got hired as a ranger in 1977. And, you know, somebody was asking me earlier, did you ever think of doing anything else? And not really, you know, I wanted to play for the Yankees, but that wasn't working out. So my whole life I was really geared toward this. And back then, my father could just take me with him for work. So when I was out of school, I would just hop in the ranger truck with him and go to work with him. And I remember some funny things, some of them don't make a lot of sense when I think about it today. Like I said, he was working in the Catskills at the time, and we used to go up and camp on top of Slide Mountain to catch people camping illegally. And I may have camped above 4,000 feet, you know, looking for people camped illegally, but generally that's frowned upon these days. The other thing I remember is you always had this thing about porcupines up there. So I remember we would actually kill porcupines that we saw on top of Slide. He probably doesn't want me to share that story, but I remember doing that. But one of the things I always remember going out with him, and that he remembers well, and it was, we were coming down Slide, and he had some people camped illegally, so he had to take care of that, and he sent me ahead and gave me the keys to his truck, just go down to the truck. And I remember going down, and it was cold, it was colder, so it was probably spring or fall, and I remember he didn't come back, so I got worried about my dad, what's going on up the mountain. So I threw my pack on and I started going back up Slide. Of course, he came down, but he was like really proud of me that I put my backpack on and just didn't go out of the truck looking for him. So he felt like he had accomplished something that way. The other thing that was really different about his era, you know, he had the duty belt that had the single bullets, you know, one around the belt, and he carried a 38 is what they were issued, so a revolver. And back then, they didn't issue tickets the way they do today. When he was in Catskills, most of the people that he caught doing something wrong, and you know, he would write very few tickets a year, probably 10 or a dozen. You know, a ranger's job was stewardship and educating, but he would write tickets like we all do. And back then, you know, before computers, if you wrote a ticket to someone from New Jersey, you never heard from him again. You know, never heard from him again. So what he would used to do is they used to do an immediate arraignment. It's kind of crazy. I couldn't imagine doing this my time. But he would actually get on the radio and he'd say, no, I got somebody camping illegally. Can you call the judge and see if he'll do this immediate arraignment? Which means you take them to the judge and you say, so-and-so is charged with camping within 150 feet of a stream. And I remember him doing this one time, and he would call and the judge would say, okay, meet me at my shop in 30 minutes. So then my dad would tell the people, okay, get in your car and follow me, and we'll go see the judge. I hard to believe they actually did this. And the judge in the Catskills had this gun shop. Does anybody remember, anybody ever hike in the Catskills? So it was Charlie Smith's gun shop. So my father would be immediately arraigning people. They'd follow him to the gun shop, and then they'd have to go into this gun shop, which was a trailer in the Catskills, and had all these glass cases with all these guns. And there they'd go through the process of immediate arraignment. And it was terrifying for those people. You know, they were from New Jersey or Long Island, and here's this ranger who really doesn't look like a police officer like they're used to, taking him to see a judge in a trailer. That's a gun shop. But yeah, my dad really was my hero growing up. And, you know, things are different for me in my time. I couldn't, you know, besides not having a judge that owned a gun shop, I wasn't allowed to just put my kids in the truck and have them go hiking with me all the time. But I did the best I could. So one of the things that I could do is if I could have somebody come along and hike with me, like my wife or my father, that's him much older, and then I would stay at outposts a lot. So I'd stay at Lake Colvin or Johnsy Brook. You know, there were caretakers that was their primary responsibility, obviously, But in way past, it was rangers, at least at Lake Colvin. I mean, it was a forest ranger at Lake Colvin up until the 60s. So that was the way that I could, instill the same stuff that my father did for me as a forest ranger. And my son, his first hike was a big slide from Johns Brook when he was 5. And, we did go up. We did go up the slide, of course, So it was a real good career in that way. But one of the things that's very different from my time to my father's time is it's the amount of use, and it's also the staffing and the amount of land that forest rangers cover today. So it's hard to believe, but in the 1970s and 80s, there were more forest rangers in the Adirondacks than we have today. And that's really just astounding, because in that time, we've added about 1 million acres of forest preserve and easement. So it's a really substantial number. And the amount of use is just really skyrocketed. And I really saw it over my 25 years. It was pretty dramatic. I went from, I would have maybe 30 or 40 search and rescue incidents a year in my ranger district. And when I retired, we were having 100. And it was consistent. It was like consistently right around 100 the last 4 or 5 years. So that's one of the things, in my last couple of years, I did take on a bit of a union role, which was probably one of the reasons I retired, because that burnt me out more than the actual rescues did. But that's one of the things they're pushing for, and I would continue to advocate for, is having a larger forest ranger presence. So when I first started out, I was really able to just explore the Adirondacks, get out, and feel like I was doing what you should be as a ranger. That is providing that stewardship message, ideally on the trail, right? You want to do that where you see people. Not that you can't do it in the parking lot, but people just relate to you when they pass you on the trail. And the conversations that you get. There tend to be more lasting. I mean, I'll have people that come up to me and say, "Oh, I saw you on such and such a trail or such and such a peak at such and such a time." And I always say, I remember everybody. Also, during my time, we really saw people doing so much more in the outdoors than we ever did before. People climbing slides. One of the things that's interesting is that people are actually camping less, or at least at a consistent number compared to hiking. I mean, I'm seeing people that will take on these hikes that are significantly longer, whereas in a day, people would tend to camp more. So while hiking has really gone up, I haven't seen exactly that same translation in camping. What are a couple of these? So this one on the left is the bottle slide on Giant. The one in the middle is the east face of Marcy. So that was a cool route I did with one of the guides up there. And I think that's on the summer base. So part of that stewardship, I said what I'd like to do. There's 3 components of the forest ranger's job. One is stewardship, and that encompasses law enforcement. Doing talks like this, retired. But it's really important to be out on the trail and seeing people. This canister ray was probably one of the best things I saw in my time as a functional stewardship regulation. But one of the issues that we still have and continue to have, if you look in this photo, they actually have a bear canister. So people are getting really good about having the bear canister with them, but what you'll see frequently is they'll open it up, they'll be sitting in the lean-to with the lid off, cooking their food. And the bear will come in and you're not going to scare the bear away. Once they become habituated to people, they're associating the campers with food. And the best story I had on a bear encounter like this was near Johns Brook. We would haze the bears with rubber buckshot, so I carried a big 12-gauge shotgun. It looked It's actually a pretty good prop for educating the public about the importance of having a bear canister. It could look a little intimidating, but so one time we got a call of a bear that we'd been tracking for a while. It already had a couple strikes against it, and I got the call. I was staying in Johnsboro at the outpost. I got a call from the lodge that it was at one of the lean-tos across the brook. So I grabbed the shotgun. I think I was still cooking dinner myself in the cabin, and I ran up there. And you know, I get up there, and the bear's gone, of course. And there's 3 or 4 people out. You know, oh, went this way, this one went this way. Some were wandering down the brook, and I'm looking for it. You know, and I got the shotgun out, and then there it is. Okay, so there's this little grass clearing. But there's 4 or 5 people around, there's a bunch of campers around, it is rubber buckshot, but it's extremely dangerous. So you gotta make sure you clear your target area. So bear's maybe 40 feet away. So I'm kind of like nonchalant, you know, looking around, seeing where everybody is, getting ready to turn the safety off. And this bear in 40 feet, next thing I know, I mean, I swear it was in a second, all of a sudden the bear was right on me. So I'm barely bringing the barrel up, and I'm just cranking off around. And the first one kind of went under him, and he just kept coming at me. Probably the second round, it was very unfortunate, but got him right in the face with a rubber buckshot. He turned super quick on that one. And I got 4 or 5 off on him as he went away. And that was the last we heard of that bear for a couple months. It worked for a time, but then it was actually a bear. They were so used to people that the following year, the following summer, he was back doing it again. And we were able to identify him because he had a scar from where he got there. Ideally, you like to, you know, hit them in behind. You want to be safe, and you don't want to shoot in the face. But boy, I've never seen a bear move like that. That's the only time in my career where I've really been, you know, fully charged like that. So anyway, I got off on a tangent there. I was starting to talk about stewardship and the effectiveness of being out there. The canister is definitely the best regulation I think that we've had in some time. So started getting a lot of rescues. I still remember like the very first one, first like significant one. It was this ice climber that fell on Chenard's Gully, which is on Chapel Pond, and it was the first time. It was a broken femur, and I remember we were loading him up. And I'll never forget it. He was a young kid, and I had like some kind of scare look on my face. I was pretty young at the time, and I remember him saying up to me, "Is it really that bad?" Like, 'cause my face must have been, you know, I must have been nervous, you know. That went away with me pretty quick because I saw so many rescues and some really serious ones over my time. I was on about 500 to 600 rescues, which is really an astounding number. You know, like when I was comparing it to my father's era, he's been on 150. You know, and he actually worked a few years longer than I did. So this is what our rescues looked a lot in winter. They tended to be more serious. I mean, it's really an emergency from the get-go. That risk of hypothermia, even when you have all the gear, it's just, there's fewer of them, but they're more serious in nature. They're all an emergency, but they're certainly more serious in winter. And this, we did a lot of this. This was a summer carry-out. This is one obviously by hand without the carriers. And this was frostbite, obviously. And started seeing a lot of this. Again, this is the more seriousness of the winter rescues. This gentleman was, you know, this wasn't one of the big stories you heard about. This is one that was kind of a nothing thing. But he was staying in Lake Placid, was up for a convention, and there was a storm coming in, and he had a break, and he asked me, he said, "Let me get up Algonquin before the storm comes in." Didn't tell anybody from his conference, and most everybody else at the conference was in the bar. So nobody knew he was missing. The next day, when he wasn't at the events, just thought he was at the bar, you know, back in his hotel room. So he went up Algonquin, made a wrong turn, kind of in the same gully where most people go, so the one that takes you down to Scott's Institute. That's like the classic catch point. So he spends the night in there. Nobody knows he's missing. He has very little beard. He's just going to run up. He was super fit. He was just going to run up there and run back down. And then the next day at like 5 p.m., dispatch gets a phone call, and it's him. And he says, I've been lost for 2 days, and I'm on some kind of trail and it's got a marker. And I think we could ping the cell phones at that point. Which, by the way, nobody should ever rely on the 911 pings for a cell phone. They can bounce dramatically. They can be off by, even if they're off by like a quarter mile, when we're looking for you up on the Summit Cone area, huge difference depending which drainage you're in. But anyway, back to the story. So we ping him, and he is on the Indian Pass Trail. He's by Scott's Institute. So I skied in there quickly, and then we had more rangers coming on snowmobiles, and we got to him. He was only in long underwear. That's all he had left. He couldn't really explain where his pants went. Well, really, what got him through the night was that he was a super fit guy, workout guy. So he had that kind of, survive nature. But he came down that drainage that whole night. And I'll never forget when we took him out, driving the snowmobile out, his hands were just like blocks. Like he couldn't really, we didn't have to put him in the litter because he could sit up, but his hands, like he couldn't really, hold on to anything because they were just blocks. And I did talk to him, his wife, maybe I didn't talk to him, but I talked to his wife a couple of years ago, and he's doing well. He did lose some digits, but he's doing well. This was another similar one. This gentleman got lost. It's another like mistake kind of thing. He was doing the Western hikes, and he was parking at the winter lot, and he was trying to get off all 4 of them, and nobody knew he was missing until Monday when he didn't go to work. And we just started in, and he was coming out, and I didn't find him, but he was on the road, past the gate, and he had one boot. This is winter. He had one boot on, and the other he had a space blanket, and he had some duct tape on his ankle. So he was walking on the space blanket, and then he had one boot on. And guess which foot this one's from? It's from the boot. Yeah. What happened was he got lost, obviously. He fell through the ice into a brook, and he lost one boot getting out. And that one he had to improvise something. And the other boot he left on, and just the water in there froze it up. He did lose he lost some toes as well. This kind of talk everybody wanted? I don't know. Like I said, you can ask me questions. So this is what I started dealing with, and all of us started dealing with. The popularity, the park is really amazing. I mean, this was a very common sight on a Monday, on a Wednesday. Like it really wasn't even the Saturday anymore. So this is the Lodge Road. And we started just measuring the cars by, how far north they're going. So does everyone know where Alcohol Brook is on the Lodge Road? So when you're driving south towards the Lodge, there's this one little sharp bend that's like, say, halfway down. You know what I'm talking about? There's a little bridge right there. And that's Alcohol Brook. I don't know how it got that name. I don't know if that's on the maps or not. But there's where a lot of car accidents are. So that's a mile north, more than a mile away from South Meadows Road. So we're getting a mile of traffic on north of South Meadows. So just real incredible amount of use. And this, I'll cycle this back when I talk about the Vic. But this is the thing when I would be directing traffic, and I'm sorry, you can't go any further. There's just no place to park. You can turn around and park in front of the last car to the north. And I could ask you, well, where were you going today? You're trying to offer them alternatives. Maybe consider going here. And I talked to so many people that would be, I was going to go hike Mount Joe. Like, well, you most certainly can go hike Mount Joe, but unfortunately you're going to walk on the road more than you will in the woods. And, you know, I started really seeing, boy, a lot of people, you know, there's a lot of other places for them to go. And also a lot of people, they think they want a certain hike, but then they don't know what that hike entails. So they're thinking of that it's going to be something else, and it turns out to be much greater than they actually were prepared for. So these were some of the lines that last year I took. This was last year, so you can see everybody's going to ask, so this was the COVID. But everybody was so competitive for these parking spots. Like, you didn't know when people were going to arrive, so you know, it was always competitive for spots, but people were trying to, you know, when you used to be able to get a spot by 7, then you used to be able to get a spot by 6. And then, you know, it's 5 a.m. and people are rolling in there, and the parking lot at the lodge is full at that time. And it really was kind of a wave of people coming in, because after this line, you know, this would be like a half hour to get everybody out. And I would stand there and make sure nobody cut line, because you do have to sign in. But then after that wave of people, it would be a little lull, because everybody's parking a mile away and having to walk down the road. All right, so enough about the gory rescue stories of people losing toes and fingers. The question I get asked a lot is, you know, what were the funny moments? You know, what was the funniest thing you saw in IPs? So I'm not sure I'm going to tell you the one about these guys. I got to read the audio. Of course, they're all masked, so I can't really read anybody's expressions. Their story's a little blue. It is the funniest one I've ever encountered. I'll wait. I got some lead up. I got to read the crowd a little bit. So one of the things I remember that was really funny, the first one was pretty early on in my career, and I was hiking out from Johns Brook, so hiking out to the garden, and I wasn't out. I guess I had just started leaving the cabin, so I was not halfway out then. I was probably a quarter mile out. And here comes this like really nice looking couple, mid-20s, dressed really nice, like dressed much nicer than I am, you know, a collared shirt, khakis, and they're dragging rollers, you know, like roller luggage. Like they're at an airport. And this is when like they were high-end people, because that was when rollers were new, you know. And you know, you see them coming down the trail, and they're carrying it and dragging it, you know. And I get there, and I was like, "Hey, I'm the forest ranger. Where are we going?" And they're like, "Yeah, we're going to the Johns Brook Lodge. It's our honeymoon." And we didn't know it was this walk. Are we almost there? I wish I saw you closer to the parking lot, but I would have turned you around. But you're actually so close now, you probably should go. And then I broke the really bad news for them. Bunk beds, yeah. Shared rooms. They didn't rent the ABO. Actually, I wonder if one of those cabins is available for them. I'm not sure. I didn't think about that. All right, here was another good one. At Johns Brook also, we had a report that somebody broke into the cabin. So it was in the fall. It was after we locked everything up. So I think we got a call from the hut mask, you know, someone at ADK Johns Brook. So we hike in there, and they smashed the window, of course, and we're in there, and cooking breakfast. Okay, what story? Cougar had followed them, stalked them, all the way off Upper or Lower Wolfjaw, all the way down to the cabin, and the only way they could escape the cougar was to break into the cabin. And they, you know, it was at night when this all happened, and they believed it. I mean, they really believed it, you know. And to this day, I really don't know what they saw, but the real funniest part. So we didn't write them a ticket. You know, they believed it. Yes, it wasn't a cougar. It was not a cougar. I did look around. It was not a cougar. but it's not a mountain lion. But I remember getting him out to the parking lot and about to go, and all of a sudden, this was a couple, all of a sudden she comes running over to the truck, and she says to me, you know, I didn't want to say this in front of my husband, but I was really afraid because I was menstruating, and I knew the mountain lions would be attracted to that and attack us. So that's why we put it together. All right, so I was stepping up one of it, so now I can tell you're ready to handle this. It's a little blue, so apologize. Is this being recorded? No. I've given too much build up to this now, I just got to tell you. So these kids were great kids, and the irony is that they came to New York for an academic competition. So these were they were college freshmen or high school seniors, and the older gentleman was an advisor, and they were from Florida and had never seen snow before. And they came up in April, and they went in from the upper works, and they hiked in. They saw some snow in the trail. Even though most of the snow was gone, they had a snowball fight. We're having a blast. Then the rain came in, and they were just really hopelessly lost with senses of direction. So I don't think they were ever actually off trail. But again, they're in there in April, not a lot of people, and a real monsoon came in that night. I mean, a ton of rain. So we were quite worried about it because it was in the 40s. So I started in there, started in some upper works the next morning, and not too long into it, well, I guess I was up there a ways. They come out along, and they're in really rough shape. You know, you can see they're all wearing new, different stuff on here. This is back at the bed and breakfast they were staying at. I had to give them a ride back. So they're bouncing around. So I just empty out my pack. Here's all my clothes. Just, you know, go ahead. And there was more than that. There's 6 or 7. Go ahead and put all these clothes on. And then another ranger came in with me, and they put all these clothes on. I remember there was only one girl in the group, and I remember, you know, she was the one that got stuck with really no clothes, so she had to walk with just a space blanket around. Like none of the guys, like chivalry is totally dead. These guys are grabbing their clothes, putting it on. So then we're walking out, and one of the guys are walking ahead, and she's kind of staying back towards us. And I didn't ask the question, but one of the other rangers with me said, man, what did you guys do to stay warm last night? That was a brutally cold night. And she turns to him and says, well, we peed on each other. So my eyes got it. And then my ranger friend said something else, and she goes, well, it did really work. And then she said something to the effect, you know, these guys probably would never tell everything that happened that night, but we had to do whatever we had to do to survive. So then we hiked out, and I'm dying to tell all the other rangers. So we tried to keep this. This is something we tried to keep to ourselves. Like, we really didn't want this. I'm telling you because this is actually this is recorded in places at this point in the media. But we tried to keep it to ourselves. But you know, a small town, like everybody knows everybody. So one of the rangers was out at a pub and was telling somebody, and there happened to be a reporter farther down. So then it started making its way to the newspaper, and then everybody started calling the DEC. I mean, we were inundated with phone calls on it, to the point where we had to put out a press release that this is not a viable survival strategy. That's not even a joke. Like, we had to put that out. And then you know, these comments on forums, so then like people are like, well, if you peed in an Nalgene bottle and got it out of you, and then you held that warm next to you, that would be effective. I guess it would. Still not going to teach that. I apologize if that was too much. So we'll get out of here then, and I'll tell one rescue story, then I'll finish up here. So this was not the most difficult rescue I had ever been on, but it was one that got a lot of press and attention to the point where, you know, some of these TV reenactment shows had them on, and I don't know what they were called, but it was kind of interesting. So this is Blake and Maddie, and they were freshmen or sophomores in college. Super cute couple, really, really sweet kids. And I got a report that they were overdue from a hike on Algonquin. And in winter, it was snowing. Not brutally cold, you know, but it was snowing. And they provided me that photo. That isn't social media great? So I can see, okay, I can see kind of where they are. I can kind of see the level of gear that they have. She didn't have much, she had a little bit more. I can see that they're pretty high up. So I started, I had another ranger with me since the middle of the night. I'd say we're starting at like 9 or so. And we call in the lake cold and advise them because, you know, maybe there's a chance they'll come down that side. And the caretaker says, well, there is tracks out here. I just passed a group. It looks like there's 2, but they didn't pass a group. They saw tracks. So then the other ranger, Rob, and I, we split up. So I went up Algonquin, and he went to Colden. We figured he'd probably intercept him, but he didn't. So I go up Algonquin that night, and I get to the top, and or you know, above tree line, and it's not super cold, but you just can't see anything. You know, like any tracks that were up there is gone. I mean, most of you have seen this. So I'm going from cairn to cairn, and I get to the top, and I'm shouting around, looking around. But you know, at this point, it's 2 a.m. It's just not real effective. And I've seen this many times before. More on Marcy, but people snow cave, you know. And I've walked within 100 feet of someone who's snow cave, and they don't hear me. They don't see the light. And then the next morning, they pop out, and they're okay, you know. So I'm still feeling pretty good about this. Algonquin is a bit different, though. They normally don't snow cave as much. It tends to pull them in a direction, you know. Usually what happens above tree line is the wind will dictate where they go and for a time, and then you'll get natural terrain features, like I mentioned earlier with Algonquin. A lot of people line up to Scott's lean-to. So I kind of, by 2 a.m. up there, I know it's time to get another plan. So I get on the radio, we order up all these resources for the next day. Ranger Rob was going to stay at Colden and come up that trail from that side the next day. So I come down, maybe 4 or 5 in the morning now. So I'm getting plans ready for where all these, you know, I got 20 rangers and volunteers coming. And we're going to hit Algonquin from every way. I think they're probably going to come out in Scott's lean-to, so I have people going in that way. But there's a lot of snowpack. So, you know, I have teams of 3 or 4 rangers or volunteers going to go up that way. They're going up the trail at the summit. They're going to go out from Colden. I got them hitting other drainages. So I got the mountain pretty well covered. And so I kind of stay on until about noon, and I've been up all night, and I'm, you know, this is the normal handoff of the incident command system. So I head home. I fully expect them to be found. You know? So then I'm laying in bed, and around 4 or 5, I text the ranger at the command post, the incident commander, "Did you get them?" And they're like, "No." So now it becomes real. It becomes real. Okay. What's the plan for the night? Where are the teams coming down? How far do they get? So survivability really drops off after that. Everybody survives that first night. I mean, almost everybody. There's only been 2 or 3 cases from the high peaks, and even before my time, from Kingfish's time, has told me these. There's only been a few where somebody died of hypothermia that first night. You know, there's 3 that I can think of. But that second night, 48 hours is a lot more for folks. So the weather was still pretty warm though, but then there was this wicked cold front coming in the 3rd night. So we know that we gotta get them. We gotta get them this time. So now they're spending their 2nd night. This is their 2nd unplanned night in here. So now it's the 3rd day, the 2nd search day. And it's really kind of an all-out assault on the summit. We have twice as many rangers at that point. We're really doing a full, we hit those drainages good the first day, so we had more people come up on the track, but we're really hitting a cone. Like now it's like, oh no, they didn't get caught by a drainage. We think they're on the summit cone somewhere, maybe dug in. Maybe not a lot, but We think they're dug in a hole. So this is what the kind of search conditions we're in. When you're searching above tree line like this, you get these, we call them spruce holes, and it's where you get these air pockets where the crumb folds over, and there's actually tons of air. You step in, and you sink down pretty deep, even with the snowshoes on. So we use extra long snowshoes when we're, it's not the little short MSRs for the one-up trail. It's like what snowshoes were intended for. So this is kind of what we're searching through. And I'm got one team on the other side. I'm on one side of the summit home, and we're walking along. And we couldn't use the helicopter for these whole days because we would have found it probably pretty quick if we could use a helicopter. But it was just, you could see, you're just socked in, and a helicopter couldn't fly that. But what they could do was fly people into Lake Holden. So they could fly under the clouds with people in Lake Holden, get them a bit closer. So we're walking along the summit home, and I got people off to my left. And helicopters flying below us, and all of a sudden, I just hear this faint, not that faint, hear a woman's voice shouting. And it was them. And it was really fortunate. They were shouting for that helicopter. They didn't know we were there. They were shouting because they heard that helicopter. And as part of our search technique on the ground, we stop every so often and yell. And I had just yelled a few minutes before, but it's not like I'm looking at the watch, timing the clocks. I mean, I'm walking along searching. Okay, let's stop and yell. So I really don't know what would have happened if they didn't yell right at that exact time. We were so close to them. So we all started pointing to where we, where we heard it, and we yelled, and then they yelled back to us, and we just started moving really fast. And then the person down to me is like, I can see them, because the visibility was, sometimes it could be 150 feet, but a lot of times it was 50 feet or less. So we get down to them, and they had certainly snow-caved. And then we told the other rangers, everybody kind of descended onto us. So we wrapped them up in our sleeping bags and bivvies and started giving them food. They were in surprisingly good shape, but they were still shivering. And that's a really good sign, because when you get below a certain temperature, your body stops compensating. It's not shivering anymore. So that, that's an indicator that they're doing okay. But they couldn't move. I mean, he had really given all of his gear to her. So he was actually, they were both in pretty rough shape time. So they weren't working. So now, slow-mo helicopter, we got to figure out a whole new team, because we've been searching the mountains. Now we got to have a whole other team come up and do the rescue. And it's 2 people, so it's 2 sleds and 2 limbs. Much more difficult. So we want to try and get the helicopter up there to get them, and they're willing to try. So the helicopter kept staying at Lake Holden, and we got them ready for a hoist. They're going to try and pick them where they drop a cable down. We hook the cable up, and they zip them up. It can be done very quickly, but you got to have decent conditions. The wind can't be too much. You got to have visibility with the ground. So I kept calling the helicopter. They'd ask us to go with visibility, and I would give them a direction, based on theirs. I'm at your 10 o'clock. They'd come up the mountain, and they couldn't make any turnaround. This happened like 6 or 7 times, and then I kind of thought about it after the fact, years later. Maybe I put too much pressure on them. I mean, it's ultimately a pilot's decision. It's state police pilot in the helicopter, and the rangers are running the hoist. Ultimately, they did make it there, and if you'll bear with me 1 second, I will see if I can bring the video for that up.
I can guarantee you those are scary conditions to fly. I flew Army helicopters in Alaska, way back. That stuff is scary. Let's see. Get the horizon.
Maybe I do need help. I thought I had this. How do I get rid of the PowerPoint for a second?
Escape.
You did. If I can move on, because I have that on my screen. All this because I'm trying to show you a 30-second video. video clip. We had it working before.
Who are the folks getting married?
Sorry, that was me in '99, you know. It throws up. If not, well, at least it just wasn't me. That's all right. All right, so you're not going to get to see the video. So anyway, it was a pretty, I'll tell the story real quick. So the helicopter came in and they did a fantastic job lowering that hook. But if you can Google it and find the, you know, and it is a Huey. You can see there's one point, I wasn't doing the hook, I was away, and I had a ranger that was doing the hook down below, and this is the second person going in. So I'm holding the radio and I guided them in. And there's one point where they came in for the hover, and they want to keep the tail of that about 15 feet above the trees. You know, they want to cut any lower than that, right? And the thing was just dancing and rocking over there. And all of a sudden the tail just dropped considerably. Like I felt, you know, quite a bit. I just yelled, 10 feet, 10 feet. And I could see the ranger's head turn back. You know, he turned back and looked at the tail. And then he went back to guide the hoist. He got them both in safely and they went out. And then after, I think it was the next day, he said, hey man, did you hear me yell 10 feet into the radio? He's like, yeah, I did, but I figured I only had 8 feet. So it gave me some confidence. So that's them on the right back in the hospital. He was much worse aware than she was. He didn't give all of her gear to her. His feet were pretty bad. He did hold on to all his toes. So that was the story. You know, that one got a lot of attention. Like I said, it was hardly the hardest one I was on, and I won't go into the whole story on these two. But these were the two most difficult that I was ever on. The one on the right was the nipple top slide. And that was quite a while ago. I'd say that was 11, 12 years ago. That was someone who fell down the slide, obviously a winner. And there's not, at least then, it wasn't a solid herd path to the base of the nipple top slide. So what made this one difficult was we had to get him down. First of all, we had to get in there, and there's a considerable time lag because there's no cell phone call, they didn't have service. So we had to get into them, and then we had to lower him down the slide, which was probably the easiest part of the rescue, maybe not the fastest. But then we had to carry him up to get back to Elk Pass. And it's super, you know, it's hardly even a herd pass. So that was extremely hard. We had people cutting ahead of the litter. And then once we got to Elk Pass, then it was kind of like a conventional carry-out from there. And all told, this rescue, from the time of injury to the time we got him to ambulance, was, you know, around 30-something hours. There were a couple times we weren't sure he was alive in the litter. His body temperature got really low. What really saved him was that he had an open skull fracture, so he didn't have that ICP. So he didn't have the brain swelling against the skull. Ironically, right, it was a bad enough injury that it may have saved his life. And then this one wasn't as severe an injury, but this was just a couple of years ago. Kind of a similar story. He was at the saddleback ledges, so this is people coming down the saddleback ledges in winter, and he broke his leg. I'm trying to think what exactly he broke. But anyway, he broke his leg, and they were stopped there, and they didn't have a ton of gear. And myself, we had a kind of a whole ranger team going up to them from the Sable Club, and we had a ranger that got hurt on that one, so we were carrying a tent. Our plan was to get to them, spend the night, and we knew good weather was coming, and probably pick them the next day. So we were going into the tent and sleeping bag and all that. But we had another ranger that got injured on the way up, so then we had an incident inside of an incident. And so we had to take care of that person. So then just another ranger Rob, who was like always on the adventures of him and I went over basin and got to saddleback ledges on our own. And we got to him at like 2 in the morning. So it was like 12 hours to get get to him from the time of the injury. And all we really could do at that point was, we took one sleeping bag and Vivi, and we just gave it to them. So they each had a sleeping bag and Vivi a pad under there. That was kind of an improvised little area for them to sleep in. We had a heated blanket, it's kind of like those hand warmers, but it's a blanket with a ton of them, and they put them in the sleeping bags for them. And by the end, Rob and I are like, just sitting, shivering in our puffy clothes, and he's like unzipping his sleeping bag. Boy, it's getting kind of hot in here now. So we were just wilting away. We were like danger becoming victims ourselves. So we stayed until the rest of the Rangers. They weren't actually right with us yet. They were almost there. We started to look out, made it out, and a whole other wave of Rangers came in and took them out a drainage that goes down to Bushnell Falls. And that was another rescue that went on about 30 hours. So those were the two most difficult I ever had. And I'll just close on about my Ranger career. And somebody asked me about it earlier. One of the things I think is interesting is that I've been chronicling and mapping where all these plane crashes have been in the Adirondacks. There's been about 200, and there's about 40 or 50 that have significant wreckage still in the Adirondacks. And this was one that I was actually on. And the funny part of this story was these guys crashed, and they get out their cell phone and they read a bunch of numbers, coordinates that they have. This is to the 911 dispatcher. The 911 dispatcher gives it to the Raybrook Forest Ranger dispatcher, and the dispatcher, doesn't matter, had moved a decimal point. So remember, if you're doing Latin long, you can do degrees, minutes, seconds, degrees, not degrees. So we got these coordinates, and we plot it, and it's on 9. So that makes some sense. There was a plane crash on 9 before. So we go up there, we get to right about where those coordinates are, and we're yelling, they're not hearing us. So we're starting to call out, like, hey man, this isn't making sense. And then these guys, there's 3 of them, they survived. They're sitting in that plane, looking at their cell phone, and they're reading that the Forest Rangers are searching for a downed plane on 9 Mountain. He knows he's not on 9 Mountain. He was going to land in Lake Placid. So he calls us and, hey, you're looking on the wrong mountain. And he was right. So I was no use on 9 Mountain. So we came down, and a whole other set of Rangers went in. And this is on Mackenzie Wilderness, off the Jackrabbit Trail, basically. That goes through there. So, yeah, that's all I wanted to say about my Ranger career, but I can take questions about it. So I made a kind of a difficult decision this spring to transition to a new job, and I'm Paul Smith's alum. I've been a trustee of the college briefly. I've been alumni president, and yeah, this opportunity presented itself to me, and I thought it was something really interesting to take on. And for so long, ADK, and I'm not just saying this because you're an ADK chapter. Honestly, without the stewardship that the ADK does in the Adirondacks, it would be lost. I mean, the DEC is just so not equipped with staff. They're great. I'm certainly not bashing anybody, but it's just what the ADK does is incredible. Especially the Summit Steward program. It's just really, hats off to everybody who donates and helps for what goes on there at Heart Lake, because it's phenomenal. So the VIC is pretty interesting. I know some of you know the history of the VIC. They've talked now about having a visitor center in the Adirondacks. A lot of that stuff is focused on Route 73, and that makes all the sense in the world, because that's where the people are going, right? So you want to have a visitor center where the people are renting the woods. Well, when the state was building their 2 interpretive centers, they selected sites where nobody ever went. Nobody was recreating at Newcomb, where the AIC is. This is beautiful Paul Smith's land. Nobody other than students was ever going there. So they built these interpretive centers, and they were really not based on educating the hikers that are going in. They were designed to introduce people coming to the Adirondacks on the ecology, on the environment. And that's why those sites were selected, because of the ecology of the landscape that they have. And this is a really incredible building. But one of the things that I've tried to do, and it's just because of my focus as a ranger, I want to maintain all the nature stuff that we do, but I've tried to do a little bit what the ADK does, because I know you can use some help. So I've started changing some programs there. You know, I still have all the nature stuff, but I've been doing a map and compass course with some other old rangers, and it's been very popular. Done some intro to rock climbing, and I'm going to do some more of that. So it's been a real exciting change for me. I think I pretty much covered all that there. I missed that slide. Our mission statement, like I said, is still very important. What we have there is 3,000 acres. We do have lean-tos that we rent out. 25 miles of trails, but the trails are the bane of my existence at this point, because they've been added onto so much over the years that it's a bit of a maze. But I do have more trail markers ordered. I'm doing some reroutes, so I can do some of the forest ranger stuff. One thing that is different there, it is a different set of users. So like I compare it to the ADK, the lodge quite a bit. And the lodge is kind of like 75% recreation, like 25 naturalist kind of stuff. And at the Vic, I think it's reversed, right? So our trails are very short, they're easily accessible, but you can be done in a short amount of time. So the people there are going for, it's kind of 75% there for naturalist experience, and about 25% for recreation, I'd say. But it's been a very successful summer there. Our visitor use is up, and we do have so many things there that make sense. You know, we're the, just like the lodges. You know, we're a footprint. We're a place for people to come and get that information before they go into the woods. So yeah, that's all I really want to have for you tonight. When you come up to the Adirondacks, I know you're going to hit the trails, but please come on over and see what we have going on at the Vic. Take a look at some of the programs that we have. Going to keep adding to that. We're adding now a advanced map and compass course where I have like 4 or 5 old rangers that teach this with me, and it'll just be 2 people with 1 old ranger. We're going to have you go to points, and about 6 hours out for the day to get to these various points, and nothing but a paper map and compass. It's not GPS stuff. So yeah, so keep an eye out what we're doing, and yeah, please come up and visit me sometime. And thank you very much. Question is, will we still have the cross-country ski trails? So the Vic in the winter is a ski center. I mean, it really is a ski center. I started volunteering there in March, and we have a piston bully groomer. We do charge a fee in winter just because we do invest so much in the grooming there. And the college has made the Nordic team and biathlon real key to enrollment issues there. So yes, we're still building up skiing, and does anybody know Roncon? People do. So we're also Jenkins, Jenkins Mountain, which overlooks the Vic, has used to be a ski center, and we're actually doing some thinning there and have some open width skiing or some backcountry kind of skiing. Anything else?
Was there ever any serious talk in, just getting back to the search and rescue, about users paying a fee similar to other wilderness areas.
Like pay entrance fee or like pay for your rescue? I mean, both have been discussed.
Well, I mean, what
And they're great discussions. I mean, you just go read them. Everybody's very polite. No, but I mean, seriously though, yeah, I mean, they've been discussed. I don't think any of them are in a serious position. You know, there's a pilot right now at the Sable Club of getting a permit, but it's free. Paying for the rescue is a little bit dicier. Like the professional rescue organizations generally oppose that because we're worried that people will not call in for help if they need it. Yeah, so that's the main reason for that. They you know, we looked at, because New Hampshire does it, you know, they charge. When we were looking at it about how much revenue does it actually generate, not very much, because they do that. You know, you can pay for the hike safe card. It really doesn't generate a lot of money. Because we were looking at that to maybe fix some of the staffing issues for my union at the time. So it's a discussion. It's definitely been discussions, but I don't think they're moving towards that in any serious way at this point.
In New Hampshire, they have the insurance, right? You can buy that.
Yeah, you know, that's what I'm referring to, that hike safe, that insurance card that you get. It doesn't generate a lot of money. I think it was something like $80,000 a year that insurance brings in. So it didn't make a lot of financial sense. Sure.
What advice do you have for people that have like a wilderness medicine certificate or medical background that comes across somebody that's hurt?
Yeah, the question is, what should you do if you come across somebody who's hurt and you have some experience with it? I mean, you should help up to your level of training. Definitely should provide assistance. I mean, one of the things that always galled me with, I saw this several times, that people that would be hiking and be so driven to go wherever they're going that they would not help with rescues or help somebody in need. You know, you can see that. You know, it's not Everest. You can see that people are left to die on Everest because you can't really help them. But come on, it's the Adirondacks. So yeah, I mean, I encourage everybody to take some of these courses are really good nowadays and geared towards providing help and assistance in a wilderness context. They're really good courses, whether you take wilderness medical associates, is what the Rangers have. Yeah, they're a really good course to take. And yeah, you should help our fellow hikers. And we should inquire. I know that the ADK members have always been real strong with that.
Yeah, do you find that people are using cell phones and relying on that to get rescued rather than being properly prepared, properly trained?
Yes. I mean, it's amazing what's in a cell phone, right? I mean, it's like this incredible computer, like you can send somebody to the moon. I mean, it's a stronger computer than that, right? All right, real quick story, like as it relates to that. And I was in dispatch, and this woman called on her. This person called on her on their cell phone. They were coming off Marshall, and in the winter, and they said, my cell phone's about to die. I used all trails to get up Marshall from Herbert Brook, and I had a spare battery, but it's not working, and I have 5%, and I don't know what to do. This is someone who went up the snow, broke trail, actually. I got that information from them. Broke trail, made a path, made it to the summit, are now coming down in the path they made on a clear weather day. And no, their anxiety was real. I mean, because they had the phone and they just looked at a dot, and I knew they'd be fine. I had the Colden caretaker run up there and meet them, and they were fine. But that anxiety had it was like that's a risk. So yeah, and there are the opportunities now where people call and they really don't need help and demand help. help something. But it's a small number. It's a pretty small number. Oh man, I just realized a funny story. I didn't tell the funny one. All right, last one, and I'll end in this. You can give me.
As many stories as you can.
So, this was This was a rescue. This is cell phone rescue, so it relates to this. So they're saying, hey, they're calling. They're coming off Mackenzie or Haystack, the one on in Raybrook, and we don't have any lights. We got nothing with us. Our cell phone is dying, and we come get us. Sure, we get this all the time. So we throw in some headlamps. We're bopping down the trail to go get them. We don't hear from them again. Their cell phone is dead, and we're getting close to the trail, and all of a sudden we start smelling something, like something burning, and we come around the trail, and here's these two women holding this stick with a burning bra out in front of them. And you look, and they're naked, except for underwear. They didn't have shoes on. They had taken their clothes off and tried to fashion a torch out of it, like they're Raiders of the Lost Ark. And it didn't work. They moved like a couple hundred feet. They burned their sneakers. Like, yeah.
Thanks, Scott. Probably 10 to 15 years ago, our chapter was fortunate to be able to have Ranger Peter Fish present a program for us. And that's a name that any hikers in from the high peaks who are of a certain age would certainly recognize that name. But I was wondering, since your tenure as a ranger certainly overlapped his, you must have known Peter Fish. And of course, it was always a pleasure if you were aspiring 46ers like Shirley and I were in the 80s and 90s to be lucky enough to come around a corner on a trail, and there in front of you is Peter Fish in full uniform regalia, and to have a conversation with him and to meet him in person. It was a real blessing that Shirley and I enjoyed twice during our time in the 80s and 90s on the trail. And I was wondering if you have details about Peter Fish.
Unfortunately, my ranger career only overlapped by 1 year with Pete. Like, I kind of came in replacing him, but as Pete liked to say, they changed the ranger map after he retired, so he kind of like ruled the high peaks. And after him, they had 6 of us in there. So he always liked to say, it took 6 of you to replace me. But it takes more than that. But I know Pete well. We'd visit a lot together. Someone asked me before how many times I'd hiked, what mountain I'd hiked the most. And I don't know, it's like Cascade or Marcy, but it's probably only 50 to 75, Pete Fish hiked Marcy 777 times. So, yeah, and Pete could get away with things that, just the things he'd say, like I was worried about telling those stories. Pete would really, as you remember, like he would really, what were his favorite lines? Oh, all my best dressed corpses are in cotton. He'd say that too. The only Pete Fish story I have was as a hiker when I was a college student. Is we were hiking Cascade as part of a class, and I was dressed appropriately, but I was with a bunch of other students that were in blue jeans, and Pete got a hold of them, and I just tried to, he might recognize me because he works with my father. He's like, please don't see me. And then once he was done explaining all that to everybody about, not wearing cotton, then I went up and talked to him after. But yeah, that was the only time I ever saw him in the woods when I was hiking. But it was memorable.